Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Perspectives on Sustainable Development. I am your host, Chris Whitehead, and it is Climate Week. So, we are going to be talking about climate change. But bigger than that, I think, is how we speak about climate change and how we educate the next generation and empower the next generation about climate change and the various challenges that they're frankly going to be inheriting from us. For a long time, I would start any EJ or climate change talk I gave by showing a picture of my children on my bio slide. Um, I did this, and I probably told this story on here before, but I'm going to tell it again real fast. I did it because I am very fortunate to have adorable children, so I always got the awe from the audience. But then it also is a good reminder to myself as to why I do the work I do and why I'm frankly so passionate about the work, but then also keeping the next generation in mind. But today we're also fortunate to be joined by two experts who work in climate education of young people, who in my mind are trailblazers on the topic and have been doing really, really important and impressive work. I was fortunate to be asked to set us down one of their projects earlier this year and was interviewed by a high school student at the time, and just their level of professionalism and intelligence on the topics really floored me. And I, ever since that point, I've been trying to follow um, as much as I can about the future climate. That we're gonna edit that part out. Follow as much as I can about the future climate collaborative. And today we are lucky to be joined by two of the people leading that group, uh, Dominique Johnson and Steve Weiner. If you can both come on, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris.
Thanks for joining. I think we've been exchanging emails and stuff for like I don't know, 18 months, a year. So if nothing else, this gets us to have the conversation finally. So I was excited about that.
We're excited to be here too.
Excellent. If you both could take just a couple minutes, talk about your backgrounds, how you got into the work you're doing, and then also after that, just talk a little bit about how Future Climate Collaborative got started.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start with that. Again, my name is Dominique Johnson. I am in corporate sustainability. I and have been in that space for around 7 years. And I came to Future Climate Collective really in a realization that I needed to do more. And I especially needed to do more surrounding young people. I have two kids myself. And it was during the storm in Portland in 2024 where we lost power. And I remember there were below 32-degree temperatures. It was very cold. We couldn't stay in our home because there was no electricity. And I just remember thinking, this is the future that my kids are going to be facing. Sorry, just the story always touches me because it's a very vivid memory for me. And realizing that we needed to do more to prepare them for what was coming, um, so that they felt, knowledgeable about what was happening, resilient in the face of adversity, and empowered to do something about it. I founded it with a neighbor of mine, Lisa Whalen, and we have now grown Future Climate Collective from those two founding members to over 50. Stephen is our director of innovation, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Great. Thank you, Dominique. And thanks, Chris, for having us both here. Yes, so my name is Stephen Weiner. I am deep in my heart, I'm still an educator. I have a background in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, for those of you who aren't in the education jargon world. I've been working in education for over 15 years now, about 16 years. And for the last decade, I've really gone in the direction of just trying to understand why it's so hard for our school systems to change and understand why they don't embrace what feels like very, very well validated evidence-based practices maybe also validated by our own experiences of what deeper authentic learning looks like. What we see happening in schools is actually a very old model that predates a lot of research on education and learning sciences. What we know is that students really learn best by doing. They learn best by engaging in authentic challenges, authentic problems, working together with others, and building things that have meaning for them. And so that's like a wide range of sort of different topics. But I think it's important to bring it up now because that's my entry point here. I spent a very long time in something called the maker movement and was really focused on maker education, which may or may not be something you or your audience are familiar with. But this is really about it's in my mind something like the antithesis of the way we normally think of education, which is it's student driven, it's inquiry based. It's often based on young people or adults wanting to solve problems in their community or make other things like art. And so I kind of combined the two streams of my sort of deep past experience teaching science and physics and for a time period teaching earth science in which I did cover climate change, and then kind of moving away from that, doing all this stuff around like what does really good learning look like? What should like a middle schooler and high schooler be doing that would like really deeply engage them? And we know that middle schoolers and high schoolers in particular are not engaged in their education. It's like lots of studies are showing this, or you could just go talk to some students, right? The current system is good in some ways for certain things, for certain kinds of very technical knowledge, and it kind of works for some students, but a lot of them are disengaged. And I kind of put these two things together and realized if we want students to be able to solve what is arguably the hardest problem that we're facing as a society, as a group of people, as a country, as communities, they need even more than ever to have that sense of agency. They need to understand that they can make an impact in the world, that they can do things. And that is what brought me here, because for the past 6 or 7 years, I've been doing research in all of this, and I kind of had a breaking point where I was like, I need to do something with all the stuff I've learned. And I came across Future Climate Collective and Dominique, and was so happy to find out that they're based in the Portland area where I'm at. And so, yeah, the rest is history, although it's only been about 18 months, but it feels like history.
Well, very interesting stuff, you two. And I apologize for screwing up the name a little bit at the intro, but one of the things I was wondering about, and I kind of alluded to a little bit of this, and you both kind of touched on it as well. What is the age range of people that you work with? We spoke about middle school, we spoke about high school some. Do you go through college as well?
So our programs are specifically targeted at high school and some late in the later of middle school. Um, but Chris, one interesting thing that we do is our operations and the people who actually go out and deliver our programs are undergraduates and recent graduates. And this was based off of our experience working with young people in university who want to do something to make the world a better place. And there aren't a lot of those opportunities. And so we deliberately chose an operation model where we give those young people hands-on experience helping to run Future Climate Collective and to deliver change specifically in high schools and middle schools.
That's great because on many levels, but just giving and allowing undergraduates something tangible to do, because a lot of times I found that they're just kind of, I don't want to say striving for possible pathways, but there's a lot of challenges that they're facing and a lot that our generations never had to, and things are more complicated now than ever with things like social media and certain job markets. So to give them that actual hands-on experience of doing something that they believe in and that they can get behind, I think some definitely amazing model.
Yeah, I'll just add here, Chris, not to make this too academic-y, but there is a term in the education literature called legitimate peripheral participation, which is exactly the way it sounds. And it's about bringing people who are at the periphery, who are outside of maybe like a practice, like working on climate change problems, and giving them authentic ways to engage and to participate alongside the people who are, experts, or who are like Dominique said, who are sort of emerging experts. Maybe they're in undergrad, or they're, early career folks. And so it's sort of like a bullseye, and you think about bringing people from the outside in, and you just have to find the right ways to do that. But that is one of the ways that it's sort of like a keystone part of I would say learning sciences now, is to understand how do you bring people from the outside into a community that's doing good work, and that's what we're trying to do.
And I think, to go off of that point, that's something that the climate movement has always struggled with, right? Which is that it has been able to reach certain people, Chris, probably like you and me, who were just attracted to working in climate and sustainable development. But I think it has struggled with what is the message for folks that are, not inherently attracted to this space. So like, how do we bring them in and make them a part of this movement? And that's something that we are specifically focused on. So we have some of the undergraduates that work for us aren't environmental science undergrads. We have an economics major, and we have an art major. We have a biology major, right? Like folks that are not traditionally in that bullseye. And it's the same thing with our programs. We recently had a climate hackathon, and the second place team wasn't part of a green team. They just happened to see the flyer and thought, wow, I'd love to win $750, right? So I think we're trying to intentionally design our programs and our collective in a way that goes beyond traditional climate folks.
That makes a lot of sense. And you guys have probably done a lot of work on this, and I know the general highlight here, but how concerned is the next generation about climate change? And have you dug any deeper as to, are there any aspects of this that they're most concerned about? Because just as an example, climate change impacts are not felt the same way around the world. It's very geographically based. So is that something you're finding as well with what's concerning these young people?
I mean, the short answer is yes. And we've done sort of like big scale research around this, or we've kind of taken a wide angle lens, and kind of made sure we understand where the field is at in understanding that question. And the answer is young people are extremely concerned. If you haven't come across, there's a new report out, relatively new, from last January from the World Economic Forum. It's called the Youth Pulse Report, and they interviewed thousands of young people. Now, granted, these are young people who are maybe not in middle and high school. Some of them might be in high school, but it's like high school and college age and a little older. But it's a really fascinating report, because these are the young people who are, entering the world right now as adults, and it's their top concern. Climate change is their top. The report lays out many other concerns that they have, economic, political instability in their respective countries, but they are extremely worried about climate change. And other research we've shown is that students feel they know about it. They're clearly aware of it. Teens they understand that this is a problem. But what we've found is when we talk to young people who are getting, whether they're getting some climate change education in their schools, or they're learning about it through other means, social media, the news, they see it as something very big and very scary, and something that you really can't do anything about. It's getting worse, though, even in places like Portland, which is ostensibly not the places you were talking about, where we are maybe not often thought of as like a frontline region of the world where climate change impacts are hitting hard. But we have now a generation of students. If you have a middle school student or a high school student now in Portland, they've lived through terrible wildfire seasons. They've lived through, as Dominique said, ice storms that downed hundreds of huge trees and made the roads impassable. And of course, just drought conditions that they don't normally see. Hot temperatures. We had a 116-degree day about 5 years ago here, and that was part of a stretch of really, really hot days. So I could go on. The point being is it's a reality for them. It's very big, and they do not feel like they really have any idea what to do about it.
Yeah, interesting. I think part of that is just the uncertainty as to what type of world that they're going to be walking into when they grow up and get jobs and find their career paths. And I've given a number of talks in the past where I tell students that almost without exception, no matter what job you actually decide to go into, you're going to be having a climate job because just because there's no other system in the world that's so intertwined and that the changes up top trickle down and affect everything below. And when you really fully understand that, I think it also helps drive the need to do something about it. But Dominique, to touch on something that your partner here said, how do you combat that feeling that okay, this is a gigantic problem, but what the heck can we actually do about it?
Yeah, so our approach is, I think, slightly different too than what we've seen before, which is we are a hyper-local organization. We solve climate problems in Portland and Portland only. And we're very intentional about that because I think one of the problems with, and when I say the climate movement, I just mean kind of like what has preceded in terms of groups trying to address climate change. It is a very big problem, and the solutions have been presented as very big solutions. So we've either told people you can recycle or you can go to COP30, right? Like those are your two options, and there's almost nothing in between. When there is plenty in between, when you focus on a specifically local level. So if you look at, for example, Portland's climate action plan has specific things that the city believes it needs to do in order to mitigate emissions and adapt to climate change, actions which a community as a whole, including teens, can contribute to. And so our education, the literacy that we deliver is specifically Portland focused. The projects that we do are specifically Portland focused, and the community that we are trying to build is specifically Portland focused as well. And we truly believe that this model of focusing back on what we can do on a local level is how to empower young people because it presents them something that is entirely achievable with people around them, which will help them to feel better, to connect with, et cetera, and to really deliver change.
Interesting. Can you maybe talk about a couple of examples of those hyper-local projects?
Sure, yeah. So one of those examples is the city of Lake Oswego, which is where I live, had a few years ago a project to make more homes eco homes. And so they worked with some high school students, and it was an eco home certification. So if your house met certain criteria, you had a heat pump, you had certain items, you got a eco home certification, and you actually got a lawn sign that you could put outside your home. And so what the teens would do is they would go house to house in Lake Oswego and talk about the program with homeowners. And so they really formed the labor that was needed in order to provide awareness, to actually do the certifications, and then to get the lawn signs on the lawns of our Lake Oswego community in order to promote the program. So that's an example of, like on the ground community work driving towards specific change because we all know we have to electrify and electrify very quickly, right? Like, so how do you drive a community towards that? Oh, well, you can have teens go door to door talking about these benefits and the programs that Lake Oswego had available in order to incentivize those transitions.
Interesting. And Steve, I would think too that the types of projects Dominique was just talking about would kind of help reinforce and feed off of the education programming as well. Um, First, I guess, is that true? And can you give any examples of the types of education work you guys also do?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to sort of like we almost don't break up the education work as apart from the impact or like the project work. I think a lot of the work that we would say we do is fundamentally project based. I would also say it is community based in that we really want to bring in to anything we do, whether we're working with students in schools or we're doing like special events outside of schools, or we're working with like special student groups that are like we've been working with some student groups that are just sort of part of a student youth council, part of like their city council. We've done a little bit of that, but in all of those cases, we think that the learning, if there is something that's at like specific sort of educational quote content that needs to be delivered, it's directed at, it's geared towards the issues that the students are working with, right? So like I'll call back to Dominique mentioned our climathon, which is just this first we did a pilot event about a month ago where students were all presented with this big challenge around the 1.5 degree Celsius temperature increase and how it already is affecting the tree canopy here in Portland. And so they learned about that both from an expert that sort of presented the problem. They also had access to mentors as they had about a week to create a proposed solution, basically trying to answer the question, what do we do as a city to make sure that we're either maintaining the current tree canopy or we're preparing also for a new set of trees or a new sort of like a new environment really for trees in Portland. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I'll say like that's the way we think about everything, which is we are not here, and we actually, I'll also say things we don't do is we're not here to go door to door to schools and tell them here are all the things every student should learn about climate change. Like there are standards in Oregon and in many other states, though maybe not enough states. There are standards for what it means to teach sort of broad strokes climate change and talk about greenhouse gas emissions and 450 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. We're here to do the like I would say a minimal amount of that kind of education, just enough to get the students to understand sort of the big picture, but then to really dive in educating them insofar as they need to be educated to, as Dominique said, actually solve real issues that we're facing.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'll be honest, when I first asked the question, like subconsciously, I think I was actually referring to traditional education, like on a classroom, whatever. But it makes a lot more sense how you framed it, and that's what I think could also be most effective. So it makes sense to me why you guys have grown as fast as you have and have had the success that you do have had. Um, just wondering, kind of as we're chatting here, have you guys also seen examples of your program members or potentially graduates choosing to further study these topics or dig into something more on their own or start up their own program, their own offshoot of this? Basically, are you empowering others to take all this even further?
Yeah, so actually our first intern, Gabby Ramos, she ended up doing after finishing her internship with us. I mean, first of all, she had her internship experience with us, she said, was transformational in that she too had been very worried about climate change, and also didn't know what to do about it. But it was with working with us that she understood that, like, you know, regular people can form a nonprofit and can like drive towards specific change. And she found that to be incredibly empowering. And I'm not sure, Chris, if she did her interview or it was with you or it was our other intern, but yeah, they ended up interviewing some climate professionals like yourself and really learning more. And I think learning from including you how to empower, how you could be empowered. And she ended up doing an internship in Norway, focused around climate communication afterwards. And she is graduating from the University of Oregon right now with an interest in pursuing something in climate. So we definitely like I think that we have impacted students in that way. And certainly I think a number of our interns who come through our program also get a sense that you don't have to necessarily do corporate sustainability. I think that you can drive change through other means, including within your own community, at a local level, within your, city council or city government.
Interesting. Um, just wondering, because your model has been as effective as it has, have there been other state to municipalities potentially checking in, picking your brain a little bit? That happens a lot of time on state policies. I do a lot on environmental justice work with New Jersey, Minnesota, Massachusetts, others, and everyone's always talking to each other. What worked here? What didn't? How can we avoid X, Y, or Z? Does that sort of collaboration also happen among nonprofits?
So I think we are at the beginning of our journey, and Stephen, feel free to weigh in here, but we are at the beginning of our journey. And certainly, I think with the success that we've had, we're in additional conversations to deliver our program to more of the Portland community. And that's where we want to focus right now. But we certainly are thinking about how to, talk about our model with other, and just to dive in a little bit further into that, I think that what we are working on is an intergenerational model of driving climate change solutions within local communities. So the way our model works is we pair a climate professional, so someone, for example, such as yourself, who has years of experience in climate. We pair them with an undergraduate fellow who does the on the ground work with the high school students, and the high school students are the ones that are then like driving the particular solution. So it is an intergenerational model, because what we found as well, like when I founded Future Climate Collective, is a bunch of my climate professional friends started reaching out to me saying like, what you're doing is so cool, I want to do something too. And at the time I was like, I don't know what to do with them. And it wasn't until we thought about how to deliver project-based learning into schools that we're like, well, we need people to help these teens. And so why don't we take friends of Dominique and put them into schools, but we know that they don't have a lot of time. So why don't we pair them? Now we have this, we have a lot of undergraduates that are reaching out to us. Why don't we pair them with this group of undergraduates who are like, so we developed this based off of the interest that we were getting. We developed this model of like how to deliver this project-based learning into high schools and middle schools. And so it is a unique program that we are driving. I think there is project-based learning in climate in other states and in other municipalities. I think the problem is, how do you bring expertise to the high school students? And also, how do you deliver capacity? Like, how do you deliver people that are going to sit with them and help them, bring about these solutions? So. I don't know, Stephen,
Yeah.
if you had anything to add.
Well, all I'll add is, yeah, we are, as you said, Dominique, we're so young still. I mean, we started, I'm not sure what the exact establishment date is, but towards the end of 2024, and we're already working with, I think, close to a dozen schools. we've done a lot of like other smaller engagements, but we have long-term relationships now with several schools in the Portland Public Schools school district, which is the biggest school district in the state. And yet, to Dominique's point, we did a big landscape scan last year with some interns, other interns, I might add, who actually left feeling more optimistic about the situation, about climate change, and also more interested in actually pursuing careers in it. But we did some research and just sort of wanted to know what was the climate change education landscape like in other places. We knew that there were things happening here and there are things happening around the country. And we didn't do anything, I would say, that's like 100% exhaustive, but we talked to like directors, executive leaders of other climate ed nonprofits around the country, some of which are very big and have a great momentum. And what we heard is they thought what we were doing was very, very promising and not exactly like anything else that they've seen. So, other people are doing kind of intergenerational or cross-sector, however you want to call it, mentorships with climate professionals and students. Some people are doing project-based learning. Other people are sort of trying to build like loose networks and community, like kind of new communities that empower youth. No one is quite doing it the way that we're envisioning it. And I really do want to also underline what Dominique said about capacity, because the reason we're doing it this way was not, I don't think, from necessarily any grand plan, although I think that this is a really powerful model. It's like looking around and figuring out who are the people who have the passion, who have the expertise, and have some time and energy to devote to going and working with students. One thing that we were very open about this. We really thought upfront that we wanted to do more with educators and kind of do more training with teachers, and we're happy to work with teachers and train them in kind of this project-based model. But they, can never be a climate professional and have that experience. That's just not their expertise. But B, also we learned that teachers are very constrained in their classrooms and in their time, and they're very overworked. I am a former teacher, so I definitely understand this. And so it just sort of like we've been kind of iterating and tweaking our model to make sure that what we're building is something that is utilizing the people who can help and bringing them in contact with the people who need that help, right? The students, the educators, and the schools. And I think that has been really successful. And I think that there's just a lot of opportunity to do that here and elsewhere if other people want to do it. But like Dominique said, we're focused on our neck of the woods.
Definitely, that makes sense. And I having just started my own company last fall kind of reminds me of that a little bit. You start off with some core principles, a mission, some type of strategic plan, but then you also have to have various continuous improvements, metrics, and always objectively judge how things are going, how you can bring in new ideas, and what you might want to do as you go forward. So, kind of on that note, can you both speak for a little bit as to any type of vision that you have for your group and what you might want to be taking on next?
Yeah, I mean that growth mindset too is definitely something that we pursue, which is why Stephen's title is Director of Innovation, because we want to be in a constant state of like, what is working? What do we need to tweak? Where do we need to go? So we are trying, different types of programs. So one that we tried, that we spoke about already is this climate hackathon. We had over 35 students involved in this hackathon. It was really, I think one of the things we were trying to solve is, I think the message with climate change has been, it is something that we can win. And I think it is becoming transparent with every day that we are not going to win at climate change. And I think that that is what was driving hope and momentum in climate change. And with that gone now, I think people are struggling with, well, how do we deliver hope to, especially to young people? So the Climathon specifically focuses on adaptation because we do want to, right, like we are going to need to put a lot of resources, time, and innovation towards adaptation. So we specifically decided to pick an adaptation focused contest. And with the goal of seeing whether young people could confront a large reality, a changed Portland, a 1.5-degree world, and emerge from taking on that challenge more empowered. Right? Like, I think we have this notion that we have to protect our kids from harsh realities. So, our question was like, could we present them with a harsh reality and have them feel like they had power over it, that they could improve it, that they could take it on? And I think the answer to that question was like a resounding yes. Like, the solutions they delivered were so innovative, and you could see in their presentations that they felt empowered towards this challenge, and they weren't looking at it like a depressed, right, like a depressed reality. And so I think that we're going to be looking at how do we do these types of programs, more of these types of programs, on the adaptation side, also on, we're continuing to look at how we drive mitigation from a local level. Another thing that I'm still interested in is expanding that tent. That was one of the drivers for creating Future Climate Collective. Is I didn't want climate change to continue to be a niche issue that certain people were attracted to. And so we're constantly thinking about, like, we have an entire youth-based marketing team that's thinking about how do we make climate cool again? And they're doing such an amazing job. It's really very inspiring. So how do we kind of use Future Climate Collective to create a bigger tent of young people that think that they can and actually do work in climate towards a better future?
Yeah, and I think that the if I like go back to something like your original question, Chris, like the vision of like, I think this is what you were asking, like the vision of sort of what does it look like if we succeed more, and to Dominique's point about like the narrative has been, I think for a lot of people, very, very implicit that and even in climate education, it's been like, okay, we know there's a problem. But as long as we do X, Y, and Z, and these big entities, these big organizations and countries all agree to these terms, if people do, the right things, then the winning that Dominique's talking about is that then nothing really has to change a lot. That's not true. I mean, and maybe it never was true, but it certainly seems like the evidence is like things are changing. Things are going to change. You could say that those changes are bad. Many of them, I think, objectively are bad. But when we talk to students, I think the new message and this new version of hope has to be change does not have to equal a bad life, right? Like, and so that's why when I talk about this, I'm always trying to frame this in like really kind of broad terms around we want students in every part of their life to realize that they're going to face challenges and they can still thrive. So when we talk about climate change, we're saying like, yes, the climate is changing. I think at some point we were saying the climate is changing and so can we. Like,
Okay.
this is okay. It does not mean you're going to live a bad life. It does not mean there is no hope for our communities, our society. And I think that we could have an adult debate we could have amongst us about the right way to portray that. But for students, I think we need to be very explicit that like there is no foregone conclusion that you will have a bad life or there is no hope just because things are in fact changing. If that makes sense as like a way of shifting the
No, that
narrative.
definitely does, and actually, it's a good lead into what I was going to ask you next. And I'll actually ask you to start off with this one too. Um, I don't want to go into politics at all with this, but obviously there's been a very, very large change at the federal level over the last couple of years, and topics like climate change, environmental justice, many others. It's almost like they did a control F and just took them all out and didn't really think about the impacts after that. Have obviously understanding that you guys are um, operating hyper local, have there been any impacts locally from those choices?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I think it's a pretty short answer, which is no. From a like principled perspective, from a values perspective, that is reflected in the policy of Oregon and in Portland in particular. I would say we are committed as a place to addressing these things. Yeah, it is perhaps worth noting that, while all of these changes were happening at the federal level, Portland or excuse me, Oregon as a state has passed legislation that reaffirms its commitment to teaching climate education
Good
in
point.
schools. Um, and we have colleagues and coworkers from the Oregon Educators for Climate Education to thank for doing that work. But the answer to your question, I think, is no. However, that doesn't mean it's easy, and it also doesn't mean that we're not facing the same sort of um, financial constraints and headwinds more generally, both in the education sector. This is like gets into the weeds of like school enrollment declines, which are national and other kind of larger problems. So it's not to say there's no problems, there's no challenges, but the challenge of sort of having to censor ourselves or anything like that. I don't know if you would add anything to that, Dominique, but I don't think we face that.
No, I mean, I think that I think in climate there is this tendency to want to like scale very quickly. And I think without this kind of sea change at the federal level, I don't know that we would have really focused hyper locally. And so I actually think that it was an opportunity that was created that kind of really did have us refocus. And I think that has been the big, even, when I was starting this, and when I remember I was interviewing for my advisory board and people were like, oh yeah, are you gonna like scale this nationally and have this in every state, right? And I think given the current climate, I think we really had to get down to working locally rather than thinking about how we were going to scale this nationally. And that has provided enormous opportunities for us. And I think really is, um, I think it's where generally we need to be focused. If you look at, for example, not the sunrise movement, sorry. There is a group in Ashland of students who advocated for a tax on gas appliances sold in Ashland. And that ended up reducing natural gas consumption or it will end up affecting natural gas consumption in Ashland itself by over 15% each year. And I mean, so if you think about the change that is possible locally, there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of opportunity to make change. And I think refocusing is actually like really beneficial. It has been for us, and I think it should be for others.
I'm smiling as you talk, frankly, because I'm currently in week 13, I think it is, of the course I built at Rutgers, and we started this thing off by teaching them how to identify impacts locally, but then also start talking about how those relate to the sustainable development goals and how I think local act global is actually a real thing. So I think as I'm sitting here recording this, I might assign this podcast as well. So thank you both for that. You're adding to my content. um, but all right, let's think here for a second. It is climate week. And I always kind of laugh at that a little bit, to be honest, because I know so many people who are working on these things all the time. And you don't need a special day, you don't need a banner, anything like that. So I guess what I'm asking is how do you guys participate or celebrate Climate Week?
So we do have Pacific Northwest Climate Week, which we will be doing this year. And we're looking to do an event specifically focused on future positive visioning of our community. So I think a lot of where we are missing hope in climate is that what we are presented with, and Spencer Glendon of Probable Futures is so good at presenting these two different realities we get. Like we get flying cars and, totally technologified future, and then we get like complete destruction and like no one, right? Like just desolate yuckiness. And we never sit in the middle and think like, what could a better future look like if we did everything right? And so, yeah, we're looking at delivering that type of an event at Climate Week and specifically bringing young people into that discussion to open their imaginations. I think it was Auden Schendler that said, like, we all, like, part of the problem in climate is that we all suffer from poverty of the imagination,
I love that.
in being able to look at what is possible. And so we want to start that within our community and bring businesses together and young people and the universities, right? Like bring community together to do that positive visioning. So that's what we're looking forward to doing at Climate Week in the Pacific Northwest. Ours is in July, so we're looking
Okay.
forward to that.
Interesting. Yeah, we have one obviously now, and then I have a fall event we do at Rutgers that is in September. And I schedule it almost because I'm just hard headed. The same week as actually New York Climate Week, with try to push the argument that hey, we could talk about this stuff in South Jersey, you could talk about this stuff anywhere. You can always have an impact. So this type of chats I always like to have. But I know we're
Well,
starting to get up on time.
yeah, I was
Was
just
that?
gonna add one more thing, which is, this notion of community. We called it Future Climate Collective on purpose because we truly believe that we are a collective of individuals, we are a community of individuals. And so one of the drivers of what we do is holding events throughout the year to bring our community together. And because like part of this has to be fun too. I think a lot of climate is doom and gloom and resilience and hard work and all of that, but we realize that like we need to bring fun back into this. And we all 50 of us that have contributed in some way to Future Climate Collective, we all like really like each other, and so we again like just we try to do Climate Week where we're all hanging out socially at least once a month. I'm trying to bring that community together.
Awesome. I think that's great. Um, One quick thought I had before we get into final thoughts and advice and all that. One of the things I've always found challenging about climate, and I think Dominique, you've been alluding to this a few times. It's always been pitched, and that might not be the correct word for it, but the picture you always get is the gloom and doom world is going to end. We have to make these changes immediately, and that I think makes people a little well terrified first of all, but it's hard to act on that. When you present choices and different actual like small steps you can take that actually help empower and show that frankly the world isn't ending, that it might just look a little different, but if we're smart about this, we'll be able to adapt. And every bit of warming we can save is a positive, is a win in itself. I think that's a good message to get across. Um, but it's going to sound a little dorky, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I spend a lot of my time looking at modeling reports, and I think they're the coolest thing ever. What people can do visually, and I understand that looking at it, but the person who doesn't stare at Excels and models all day long, that's not going to translate to them. Would something like hypothetically a VR headset of that modeling that actually puts you in the middle of it, if that can ever actually be economically viable, is that type of step something that you think could potentially help?
I'll step in as someone who's I can play both sides of the technology, the ed tech conversation here as someone who's got like a long history of working with ed tech tools, and I did some VR stuff about 7 years ago. Um, I think that all of those things could be helpful, and all of those things maybe aren't necessary. Like, I think it depends on it. If I think students actually respond just like adults respond to numbers and statistics and models when they can tie a narrative to it, and even better, and maybe even a complement to a narrative, like Dominique was saying, is if they can tie a visual, imagined future to it.
Mm.
So, I mean, I think that we've already come across some students who actually like love playing around with numbers and models and are really interested in sort of a real kind of quant perspective on, whatever, climate risk or, temperature changes, that sort of thing. But I think for most students, what they want is to understand like the feeling, and they want to have kind of a clear story associated with different futures. So if you're showing models, right, and if you have three models, three scenarios, what do each of those feel like for different people?
Yeah.
What stories are going to emerge from those? Could VR help with that? Maybe. Is it necessary? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm with you, Stephen, on that. Like, I do think the most powerful thing is that feeling. I mean, I still remember. So, one of our groups that we assisted with is Grant High School, and they planned a community night focused around electrification. And to just see, so two representatives from the Oregon House of Representatives showed up, including the head of the Environmental Caucus. And you could just see on their faces how empowered they felt that like they had organized a night that over, 30 people in their community showed up, and they got like a member of the Environmental Caucus to show up and, give a speech on the importance of climate change in Oregon. I mean, it was just so when you see that, that is, and that's gonna that so that student, is now completely. We've actually seen her apply to work with Future Climate Collective, right? Like that sense of empowerment lasts a very long time and will hopefully affect, say, this student's future, and follow her along in her career and her journey.
That's great. And I think that's a good segue to the final question, final thoughts. I always ask a variation of this because our biggest demographic is actually young people. We've been very fortunate to be downloaded in over 90 countries in the world now and have roughly a third of those downloads be people under the age of 25. So if you have anything to say directly to them, what would that actually be as they potentially look for jobs in climate or ways to actually make a positive impact hyperlocally? Go.
Oh, I think I'll start by saying I hope that they're listening. I would also hope that their educators and the adults in their lives are listening as well. But I think that the message I would send is they need to push their schooling to recognize that they don't need to just study climate change, and school doesn't just have to be about preparation for a distant future. Especially in the context of climate change, education has to be part of the real world now. And this isn't actually just something for the students, although I think it's super beneficial to kind of move and merge the kind of have a bridge from where students are to where they're going to be. I think that's very valuable as like a sort of a pedagogy for learning. But I think also it needs to happen. Like if you're 16 now, and you have to wait until you've graduated high school and you graduate college, it's almost a decade of lost time that you could be helping solve problems. So the message I would send is they can solve problems now. They can help. They need get a few friends together. Maybe they just need to contact their, Dominique brought up city climate action plans and find out how they can contribute there. That they can talk to their school to figure out if they get some school support for either extracurricular or even curricular work around actually solving problems in their community now, because they can.
Yeah, I think so. My message is actually my realization that I had in 2024, which is I think that we are all taught that we are consumers and voters and employees, and that's about all we can do in order to change is to change things is to vote or to buy something or to work for a company, right? Like I think that we have so much more power. And this is the message I actually give student groups when I go and talk to them is what my journey has taught me is that I have so much more power. I just have to look beyond the roles that I've been given, and see myself as a change maker, as a leader, as a community organizer, right? Like, I think that that is the next phase of where we are going as a society is more change driven by people like me, like Stephen, like you, Chris, right? Like I think we need to embrace that and break out of these molds that we've been given. And they can also, if you're interested in working locally, I'm already mentoring someone in the Bahamas. I'm happy to mentor other groups that want to start something locally and drive change. So happy to work with anyone that has an interest.
But thank you both very much. I enjoyed this chat, and thank you to everyone who's listening. I hope you found it hopeful, found it empowering. Talking about climate is always difficult, but it doesn't have to be debilitating. So I think it's an important point that you can take those local steps and find collaboration, find hope, and find, frankly, purpose a lot of times, and everything that's happening around you. So with that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you very much.